Story 1: Who Framed Roger Rabbit? That poor little shoe was put into the acid, and the villain getting back up after being run over with a road roller. Those scenes were in my nightmares for a while. Story 2: The Black Cauldron sent me into an existential dread spiral that left me debilitated and afraid of my own mortality for years. Story 3: Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. That kidnapper scared me a lot. I hated every second of it. Story 4: 90% of Brave Little Toaster. Almost every time the characters turned around, someone nearly died. Lampy getting electrocuted, Blanky almost getting stolen by mice, the flower, Blanky telling Toaster, "I'm not scared," before his head goes under a deep mud puddle, the song Worthless, and the kid almost getting crushed by the trash compactor. This movie scared me a lot as a kid. Also, shout out to the opening of Twister. I had nightmares of being sucked into the sky by a tornado and thought that was the whole movie for years. Story 5: Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. Those troublesome Oompa Loompa just appeared, sang a creepy song, and then rolled the children away, never to be seen again. Story 6: The Fly. I was 8 and my father let me watch it. It absolutely traumatized me, and now I am 33, and I still intensely hate flies. Story 7: The Never-Ending Story. To this day, I see Artex, the horse's eyes as it sank. Amazing movie, but it still makes me cry. Story 8: The Shining, The Woman in the Bathtub. It is my mom's favorite movie, so I ended up watching it with her way too young. Story 9: I don't know if this counts, but Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. The scene with the torture bugs that they put in people's ears. Teenage me left the theater. But I don't know if it counts because the real trauma happened years before that, and the movie just made me relive it. Story 10: The Original War of the Worlds. When that thing unscrewed, to this day when I see something divided into thirds, such as the Mercedes logo or a paper plate, I think of those Martians. Story 11: My dad had on the movie Outbreak from 1995 for only a few minutes. Seeing that man dying on screen while his girlfriend is screaming is etched into my brain. Story 12: Jurassic Park. I saw that movie way too young in the 1990s, and it made me absolutely terrified of dinosaurs, which were very popular during that time, so there was no escaping it. Story 13: When I was 5, my grandfather let us, his 4 grandchildren, watch Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds while babysitting. I really dislike birds. Story 14: My mom was watching The Green Mile one night as I went to bed. I peeked my head out the door just in time to see the man get his head fried in the electric chair. I have had that vision in my mind for years and to this day have not seen the movie. Story 15: Carrie. I watched it when I was about 8, and the prom scene was the scariest thing ever. The big eyes and the blood on her. Story 16: The movie Arachnophobia gave me a fear of spiders, which remains one of the major issues in my life to this day. Story 17: Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds. I was about 9 and went to the theater with my big sister who was 13. I don't know what our parents were thinking. During the movie, I chewed completely through my little vinyl purse strap, and my sister worked a tiny hole in her cotton sweater into a hole she could put her fist through. We slept in the same twin bed for about a month afterward. Story 18: Wizard of Oz. When I was 4 or 5. My sister said her creepy boyfriend knew the flying monkeys, and I was very scared. Story 19: My preschool showed a movie about a boy who had a monster in his closet. It might have been There's a Nightmare in My Closet, which is not really a full movie. The monster turned out to be friendly, but this was the first time I had heard of monsters in closets. Instead of learning a lesson about confronting my fears and not judging by appearances, I went home thinking there could be monsters in my closet, and I might not have the friendly ones. I spent some time running past my closet door and hiding under the covers every night after that. Story 20: Saw Chucky at far too young an age. I definitely thought all my dolls wanted to kill me for a few years afterward. Story 21: Poltergeist. I couldn't stand the static on the television, and I believe it is due to that movie. The end of broadcasting day would scare me a lot. It made me anxious to the point that I couldn't get up to turn off the television. I would just cover my face with my blankets and wait for the television to turn off by itself after a few minutes with that static. Story 22. Saw. Parents were out of town, and my older brother had rented the movie with a few of his friends. He said I could stay up late if I watched the movie with them. I couldn't get the pig mask out of my head for quite a while. Story 23. My parents rented the movie Hook for me when I was 3 or 4 years old and really into Peter Pan. However, my takeaway from that movie was that Captain Hook could come into my bedroom and kidnap me anytime. I spent a few nights afraid to sleep. Then one day, I marched up to my parents and announced, "If Captain Hook does come, I will just beat him up with my muscles." Story 24. The Goonies. Sloth scared me a lot. My parents played a cruel prank and bought a mug with his face on it and used to hide it in the cabinets and other places. The part where Chunk throws the candy bar and Sloth reacts wildly traumatized me forever. Story 25. The Butterfly Effect. That movie had so much dark content involved it felt too real to my younger self. Story 26. If by child you mean 16, then The Grudge. It has been 20 years and I am a grown adult, and that movie still influences some decisions that I make. Story 27. The Blob. I saw it on Dialing for Dollars, and I couldn't sleep with my bedroom door closed for years after that. The blob was going to come creeping under the door. I had a plan to jump on top of the dresser, then grab the top of the door and swing through it right over the top of that blob. Story 28. Jurassic Park. Mom said, "Do not show it to our 4- and 5-year-old children." Dad said, "I am going to show it to them." Then I had dinosaur nightmares until my 20s. One of my all-time favorite movies, though. Story 29. The Fly. I had severe emetophobia as a child. I was probably 9 or 10 when I saw it. When he vomited on the donut, I experienced so much anxiety and had nightmares for a week. Sometimes I would get out of bed at night crying for my mother, thinking I was going to vomit too. Now I watch it and it looks so fake and goofy, and I am no longer emetophobic, so I just laugh at it. Story 30. The peanut butter solution was a nightmare that I still have not fully recovered from. We watched it in elementary school shortly after its release. I must have been in 1st or 2nd grade at the time, and I can only assume it was considered a harmless Canadian children's movie then. Story 31. Seeing a VHS tape labeled the movie The Breakfast Club, but my parents had recorded a pornographic video over it in their bedroom. Story 32. There might be more I could be repressing, but off the top of my head, Alien. I forget which movie in particular it was, so I kind of just avoided the whole series. Mars Attacks. I sometimes feel bad because I hear this was supposed to be a comedy, but I was quite young. I remember a scene where there was a scared couple, and one person says, "Take my hand." They're holding hands, and then after a moment, they look back. The camera pans to show that the person was vaporized, and all that is left is the hand the other person was holding. RoboCop 2. Just saying the title, one can say, yeah, I can see that. But the scene that particularly traumatized me was where the villain is in the hospital, and the doctors are drawing on his head with a marker because they are going to extract his brain to put it in a robot. Everything about that upset me as a kid. I had nightmares about the brain in a jar and dreams where that scenario happened to me. I think that contributes to why I never liked doctors growing up. Starship Troopers. I remember not liking the movie at first, but I got really upset when the protagonist's girlfriend got impaled from behind by one of the bugs while on the way back to the ship. This caused some issues for me and why I initially refused a game I got for Christmas later on Jet Force Gemini since it involved alien bugs as the villains. It may still affect me nowadays and might be part of why I'm not a big fan of Helldivers 2 despite its overall praise. Also, it isn't necessarily a single movie, but I was really freaked out by any kind of inside-the-body human anatomy documentaries. Like really freaked out. I don't really know why. Story 33. I can't for the life of me remember what movie this was, but I want to say King Kong. There's a scene where a group of men are scrambling on a steep cliff face and hear rumbling. It turns out to be a stampede of sauropods, and the men have to try to outrun giant animals on a narrow mountain ridge. The following scene is a horrific display of petrified helplessness, as these grown adults feebly try to dodge supermassive animals and fail. Something about watching people fight for survival fully aware there is nothing they can do to prevent their own death, and that their inevitable death will be terrifying and likely painful too, really bothered me. My stomach hurt thinking about how scared I would be on a cliff like that, with hundreds of building-sized animals panicking around me. Just spending minutes wheezing against the whirling dust clouds, dodging giant feet and flinging tails, knowing that no matter how well you play the game, you are going to die, and yet you still frantically try because you are too scared to die. This is also why I have an issue when watching the car bomb scene in Law Abiding Citizen and a particular episode of Breaking Bad called Crawl Space. Both hit that same button that I think was programmed by this dinosaur scene. Story 34. Monty Python and the Meaning of Life. Specifically, the organ donation scene where people show up to collect the kidney and liver while the person is still alive, and then hack them open to take it. I was about 5 when I saw it and did not know what movie it was until I was in my early 20s, when a friend wanted to show me this super awesome movie. The memories came rushing back when it got to that scene. Story 35. Alice in Wonderland television miniseries 1985 Part 2 Through the Looking Glass. Story 36. The Wrath of Khan. I had to sleep with blankets around my head for months because I was so scared of bugs crawling into my ears. Story 37. Pet Cemetery. The scene with the girl with spinal meningitis had me clinging to my sheets at night for weeks. Story 38. Aliens and Communion. Aliens came out on television in the mid to late 1980s, a few years after the theater release, and my 8-year-old brain could not cope. Then I saw Communion, and the thought of one of those gray alien faces peering out from an ajar door was terrifying. Now, Story 39. The Boy in the Striped Pajamas. I was in 3rd or 4th grade when I learned about the Holocaust. It caused me horrible anxiety for weeks. I struggled to read and learn about it in school without feeling nauseous all the way up to high school. I still cannot face it or watch it again. Story 40. I'm good with it now, but back then it scared me a lot. The beginning shed scene and the whole government plastic tunnel scene, plus him dying. I couldn't fully watch it until my teens. Story 41. Spirited Away. I played on Cartoon Network when I was around 7. It wasn't necessarily the monsters as much as it was the scene where the main character's parents transform into pigs. Watching them stuff their faces while slowly morphing into gluttonous beasts, with no indication of returning to their human form, triggered something deep within me that hasn't left me since. Story 42. I've answered a similar question before, so I just copied my previous comment. When I was around 8 years old, my dad had visitation rights that he only used to upset my mom. It didn't matter that I didn't want to go. If my mom tried to avoid making me go, he would call the police, and they would force her to take me. He didn't care about spending time with me. Anyway, that's the backstory. Halloween. When I was at his house, he would set me on the couch, put on the Halloween movies, and go do whatever. Those movies were my babysitter. To this day, I cannot watch any of them. I am terrified of them at 33 years old. Good news? They just sent my dad to a nursing home, and a terrible one at that. He wants me to visit or help. Laughing out loud. Go watch Halloween, Dad. Story 43. Scary Movie 4. Ridiculous, I know. It was that boy who was meant to be a satire of The Grudge. Horrifying. Story 44. Faces of Death. My parents watched it with me in the room. I was 3. I still have nightmares from time to time. Story 45. One of the Wallace and Gromit movies, I do not remember which one, has a particular scene with a chicken wearing a latex glove on its head. It terrified me for reasons I still do not understand. Story 46. The Brave Little Toaster. Apart from having some scary scenes, I think this movie created a generation of hoarders. I know I still have some trouble throwing things away, and I trace it back to this movie making every object seem alive and the landfill a horrible place where they will be tortured. Story 47. Fire in the Sky from the 1990s and Hellraiser from the 1980s. Good God. I even tried to watch them again as a seasoned adult and was instantly re-traumatized. Story 48. Tremors. I don't know why, but that first scene of the worm coming out of the ground had me screaming and crying. Story 49. Child's Play 1 to 3, The Day After Tomorrow, The Hills Have Eyes, Saw, Jeepers Creepers. Why did I have access to so many horror movies as a child? Story 50, Nightmare on Elm Street. I had nightmares of Krueger trying to kill me into my 30s. I just accepted the fact that I would deal with these for the rest of my life. It was not until a few years ago, when I actually watched it as an adult, that I realized it was as much a comedy as it was a horror movie. I kind of feel foolish for being that terrified of him for so long. Story 51, Poltergeist. Some careless caretaker thought it would be great to shock us into believing in the supernatural at the Catholic daycare I attended. Story 52, electrocardiogram, when they have them in the tent for medical tests or something like that. I hated it enough to never watch again. Story 53, the opening of The Prince of Egypt. One of the first movies I watched on a big flat-screen television. We always had a smaller box television at home. DreamWorks animators instilled a lifelong fear of alligators and crocodiles in poor 5-year-old me. Story 54, Do Not Laugh, Laurel and Hardy television episode. The final scene showed them with their heads turned completely backward. I could not stop sobbing. I was about 3 or 4 years old. Story 55. Strangely, Hocus Pocus, I love it now, but it really scared me as a kid. I wasn't really exposed to horror films like I am now or in life. Now I am not scared of anything, at least I don't admit to being scared to anyone, not even myself. Story 56. When I was 9, I asked my mother if I could watch Temple of Doom. She thought it was Raiders of the Lost Ark, and she spoiled the ending for me. She also told me it might scare me. I watched Temple of Doom and was absolutely traumatized by it. I told her it was nothing like she had described, and she said, "Oh no!" Story 57. I do not know what movie or show it was, but there was a scene where a talking banana begged a woman not to eat it. Eventually, she gave in to hunger and ate the banana. To this day, I have no idea what movie or show this was, but talking food movies will always gross me out. I refuse to watch Sausage Party. Story 58. The Frighteners was a movie starring Michael J. Fox, who could see dead people or people with unfinished business. It scared me a lot and was the only movie I remember staying up all night feeling scared over. Story 59. Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Monkey brains. Baby snakes. Then there is ripping a man's heart out while he is still alive. Story 60. Howard the Duck. I could not tell you one bit of that storyline, but there is a scene where some alien creature comes out of someone's mouth, and I quickly left that movie. I was maybe 5 years old when I watched it. Story 61. Mars Needs Moms. I thought that aliens would be looking into my window and trying to find a way to steal my mom. This created a lifelong fear of having window shades up at night. Story 62. A bit obscure, but Little Nemo, Adventures in Slumberland, 1989. There is a scene where the nightmare, a blob-like entity, envelopes the cheerful king of Slumberland while he is merrily dancing at a ball. I asked my parents to turn off the movie at that moment and never finished it until decades later. Story 63, Little Nemo, Adventures in Slumberland. The nightmare behind the locked door scared me for a long time when I was little. Story 64, Trilogy of Terror. That little frightening doll chasing her around. I saw that when I was 6. 50 years later, I am still creeped out. Great parenting, huh? Story 65, Child's Play. I hate that doll and I hate that he is back in fashion. Chucky needs to be removed from the human psyche. Story 66, The Adventures of Elmo in Grouchland. I was about 5 years old, and there was a showing of it at our local theater. I was very scared of the evil man who had Elmo's blanket. I started crying during the movie, and we had to leave. Story 67. The Fox and the Hound was the most traumatic. The Lion King. The never-ending story. Honestly, they are all too intense for children. What were adults thinking? I watched them on VHS, sitting on the carpet in front of the television, crying. And the first Harry Potter movie. I was 8 or 9 and the whole school went to the movie theater. Seeing Voldemort, Snape, who I thought was intimidating and scary, and all the darkness on a big screen ruined fantasy for me for the next 15 to 20 years. Story 68. My parents were not the sharpest tools in the shed and let me go to the theater alone to see the original Amityville Horror when I was 12. They paid for that bad decision for years. Story 69. Final Destination 3. I was at my cousin's house because they had a giant party. I was about 6 years old and saw the tanning bed scene. Story 70. Dawn of the Dead, Zack Snyder version. I was genuinely convinced that a zombie apocalypse would happen any day for a month straight as a kid, and my parents did not realize it, which made it even scarier. It was also my first real introduction to zombies as a kid, so I was very scared. To this day, that movie gives me butterflies, but I love zombies now. Story 71. Scream scared the hell out of me, and I wouldn't admit it because I was 13 and too old to be scared by a movie. To be honest, I haven't watched any Scream movie since. Story 72. Halloween. I have been scared to look out my window at night, fearing to see someone looking back at me. Story 73. Seymour the Safety Seal is a children's video featuring different songs that promote safe practices. The song Don't Talk to Strangers stuck with me deeply. Even now, in my 30s, I remember it clearly. Story 74. Total Recall. I was around 5 years old and woke up after midnight because I couldn't sleep. I only saw the scene where Douglas Quaid, Arnold Schwarzenegger's character, has a nightmare that he takes a trip to Mars and his space helmet breaks, exposing his head to the low-gravity environment and causing it to implode. That image stuck with me for some time. Story 75. Moonraker and the Spy Who Loved Me. I was scared of Jaws, whom I referred to as Bullet Teeth. I used to hide in the hallway when he was on screen. Story 76. The Elephant Man. I saw it when I was about 7, and it traumatized me for years. I have never watched it since, and I am 50 now. Story 77. Chucky. My brothers convinced me that Chucky was real and that he lived in my closet. I slept on my dad's floor for 6 months. Story 78. Invasion of the Body Snatchers. The last scene in the movie, where even one of the main characters, whose name I cannot remember, was assimilated. The horrible shriek when he saw the only other survivor, who was his friend, was very disturbing. That scene really affected me. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.